Going on YouTube, we tapped in with your boy Big O, watching another episode of UTV, the TV you can feel and see. And in today's video, we're going to be speaking about one of the deadliest wars in Chicago's history, how it started and how history has repeated itself through the FBG Duck murder case. And I'm going to explain to y'all here in today's video. But before I do so, don't forget to smash that like button on your way in. Why? Because it helped the channel grow. We're trying to get at least 100 likes here in today's video. Now, as y'all all know, the three faces that you see here on the screen is three kings, with the one being the middle, the king of all kings, David Barksdale. Here on the left, Larry Hoover. Here on the right, Jerome Freeman, a.k.a. King Shorty. Now, as you all know, these three guys together formed a alliance, which we know by Black Gangster Disciple. But before we get into that, let's talk about how it all started. Now, Larry Hoover and Jerome Freeman both were heads of their gang. Larry was the head of the High Supreme Gangsters, and Jerome Freeman was the head of the Black King Cobras. These two men did not like each other, okay, at all. They were into it. Their gangs were into it. But they did have a mutual friend, David Barksdale. Now, during this time, all three of them also had the exact same enemies as well, except Larry Hoover. He wasn't into it. The High Supreme Gangsters was not into it with the Stones at the time, but he did have dislike for the Mickey Cobras. At the time, they were some other stuff before then, but I forgot the name of it. But he didn't like the Vice Lords and a few other fractions that the Stones dealt with. But again, Larry Hoover himself was not into it with the Stones at the time. But David Barksdale was heavily into it with the Stones. So what David Barksdale wanted to do, he wanted to bring these two guys together since he is a mutual friend and they all shared some of the same enemies. So the king of all kings, David Barksdale, brought together his devil's disciples together with Jerome Freeman's Black King Cobras and Larry Hoover's High Supreme Gangsters. Now, the reason why these names are in red is because together their three gangs formed the Black Gangster Disciple Nation. David Barksdale was a devil's disciple. Jerome Freeman was the Black King Cobra. And Larry Hoover was the High Supreme Gangster. And when you put them all together, you got the Black Gangster Disciple Nation. Now, this was David Barksdale's idea to combat with the huge force that the Stones actually possessed. At the time, the Stones was a force to reckon with. Could nobody fuck with them at the time. Basically, they was a huge gang. They was the biggest gang in Chicago. And at the time, Chief Malik was working on a huge coalition, which we know now today as the People Nation, okay? That's a huge thing. We ain't going to talk about that here in today's video. We're going to leave that for the next one. But during that time, they was putting so much force on David Barksdale, they even shot him. But we're going to talk about that here later. Now, once they formed together the Black Gangster Disciple Nation, in 1970, David Barksdale was shot by the Black P Stones. Now, during that time, he did not die. He actually survived, and he continued to run the Black Gangster Disciple Nation. Now, since he brought these guys together, David Barksdale is considered the king of all kings. All right? Now, in 1972, David Barksdale went to jail, but he continued to run the organization from the inside. But in 1974, he died from kidney failure. All right, but let's rewind a little bit. Before he actually died in 1973, the year before he actually died, Larry Hoover got into a public relationship with Jerome Freeman's baby mama. All right, during that time. Now, let's fast forward, 1974. David Barksdale surpassed from his injuries due to the Stones shooting him back in 1970. He died in jail from kidney failure, which now the king of all kings is now gone. And during that split moment, Jerome Freeman decided to take a third of the entire organization for himself and wage war on Larry Hoover and the other 2/3 of the BGD nation. Some people say that Jerome Freeman actually started that war due to the fact that he was upset that Larry Hoover was messing with his so-called woman, right? Now, since that transpired, 2 years later, they've been at war. 2 years later, Jerome Freeman, 2 years later, on September 2nd, 1976, in honor of David Barksdale, Jerome Freeman, and for his hate for Larry Hoover, Jerome Freeman decided to drop the gangster out of his fraction name and keep the disciple in honor of David Barksdale and the love that he had for him, and kept Black Disciples. That's when the Black Disciple organization was formed, because King Shorty had a huge dislike for Larry Hoover, so he dropped the gangster out of his 1/3 fraction that he took and kept the name Black Disciple, and disciple in honor of David Barksdale and the love that he had for him. Just 3 days after that, Larry Hoover decides to drop the Black out of his fraction name and the dislike that he had for Jerome Freeman, and keep the disciple in his name for the love and honor that he also had for David Barksdale, ultimately forming Gangster Disciple. Okay? David Barksdale was never a BD, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, David Barksdale never even heard the term of Black Disciple. The true king of the Black Disciples is Jerome Freeman. He started that organization himself. In fact, the Black actually originated from Jerome Freeman due to the Black King Cobra. The disciple, which means follow, that's why they both kept the name disciple in their name, as a following of David Barksdale. And that's why both sides, the BDs and the GDs, continue to use the same and follow the same literature, laws, and books that was set by the devil's disciple and the following of David Barksdale. Now, the reason why I say history seems as though that it has repeated itself, because let's rewind. Back in 1973, Larry Hoover started to mess with Jerome Freeman's baby mama publicly, which a lot of people said made him very mad. And when David Barksdale actually died, and that's when Jerome Freeman waged the war on Larry Hoover, and his 2/3 due to him messing with his lady. And the reason why I say history has repeated itself is due to the fact that in the FBG Duck murder case, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of people has been speculating that since Duck was messing with THF Teezy baby mama, and what Teezy said on the phone about, yeah, this nigga messing with my baby mama, she having him around my kids, it ain't gonna be no more of that. It seems as though that he called them mad because Duck was messing with his baby mama. A GD messing with another BD baby mama, man. It seems as though that history has repeated itself on that line of accord. And not only that, y'all, Jerome Freeman, a lot of people put everything on King David, right? All the BDs say on King David. And King David never was a BD, but at the same time, Jerome Freeman actually did denouncing seat of leadership of the BDs after he got out of jail in the mid 2000s, and he actually started pushing peace. He actually started pushing peace, trying to stop this BD versus GD war in the early mid 2000s, basically, y'all. So with that being said, man, far as this pushing peace now that I'm seeing a lot of people trying to do, I don't think it's going to go far at all, because if Jerome Freeman himself couldn't push peace and actually get that through a lot of people's head, and he basically the one that started this war between the GDs and BDs, honestly, he the one that waged this war, y'all, and he couldn't push the peace. I don't think it's ever going to happen, man. But this is the story how the GDs and the BDs got into it, how the BGDs was formed, and how ironic till this day, y'all, you can see a lot of Stones shaking up with BDs. Not like real, like they got a handshake, but they just come together and they drop the forks together. That's how they shake up. You will see them in the county doing that. And it's funny to me that they do that they put it all, the BDs love King David so much. But the Stones shot this man in 1970. His kidneys failed in 74 due to that attack. And you can still walk up to a Stone and lock a handshake with him, knowing what really happened to David Barksdale, man. It's real sad, man. But that's the truth, and the big O gone.